All right, so where I'm picking up with the story about Boaz, Ruth, and Esther. Okay, now I have gone on about this, about how we kind of pick up where Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had went before Congress the eve of Purim. And I've elaborated this in a note on my Facebook page. So I'm going to kind of skip over some things to get to the point. Knowing the story about how Ruth had stood by Esther and she went gleaming. Now, Boaz kind of already knew in advance that there was some people that were hungry, and he would tell his servants to go ahead and leave what's left over in the field. And because Ruth went and said she knew she would find favor in Boaz, meaning she had the faith to go ahead and go start gleaming, and that Boaz would find favor in her. Because listen, Ruth was righteous in so many ways. She was doing all the right things, and it's no wonder she had the confidence to go forth. And Esther stood back. Now, the relationship with Ruth and Esther is very representative of the Christian church today in America, worldwide, and the relationship we have with Israel. And it was best explained by Stephen Ben-Danon, and I would really tell you to go and look up more about Purim, why it's so important, and where we're at today. Because a lot of these stories that happened in times of back in more biblical times are really representative today. And it's always been explained that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So God would do the same thing, and he would show us examples, and that's really what the stories in the Bible are, examples of how God does things. Those scriptures and these stories were there's a lot of similarities, more or less, okay? So if God reveals himself through stories like in Esther and Boaz, and why he used Boaz as the example, more like playing the role of Jesus in some ways, almost a messianic kind of character, and Ruth being more like the Christians because she was the Gentile, and Ruth being that way, and Esther, of course, representing Israel, the Jewish people. So if you look at it like a metaphor, you can understand that this is why the story plays in part of the fullness of the Gentiles. And it was on my heart, and I got the full story today. It's been really burning on my spirit to know more about this story, because I see so much about the story of Esther, the story of Boaz and Ruth now, in a way that it really represents what's happening to the Christian church. Now, I don't know anybody else that wouldn't recognize this, at least on the Jewish side of my family, how honorable Christians can be, and how the respect they have for Israel in so many ways. And then there's, of course, the ones that kind of get away from that. I'm not sure I can really figure that one out, but there are the Christians that really stand by Israel. They're just in full support. They'll be there, faithful to the end, literally. And that is kind of the relationship what we were talking about, and when I go into this, so it'll make more sense. But the relationship with Christians today in Israel, when we, as the Christian church, stands by Israel, Boaz, meaning the Lord, sees that, and he has mercy on what is the metaphor using Ruth, showing mercy on the church. Because, listen, there's nothing more kindred about two people that will stand by each other to the end. What we saw with the Iranian deal, okay, isn't representative of the Christians today. Okay, it's not representative of the Christians in America, the ones that really stand by Israel, the true believers. and this is why these metaphors are so key, because a lot of people don't realize that a lot of the traditions that were used in the time of biblical times, and it's so important. I've heard rabbis kind of elaborate more and really fill in the holes for the Christians. And it's just an amazing awakening that is happening, because now you got the messianic grafted in, and the Christian church is like, wow, this is exactly what this means. Because if you come from a more secular background, and you don't know that the Hebrew traditions are representing today in this end time scenario, really the end of the church age, because I really know that how is it not possible that there would have to be a merging, like the bride becoming merging one with the Lord in the marriage of the feast, which is representative of the harpazo. Now, everything about the Jewish wedding, okay, how a Jewish wedding is traditionally handled, like the bride has to wait. She has to have the candle lit, and any time the groom can come and get her. I mean, once they are in engagement, he can come and get her, and then they leave for a week. That's representative of a week in years. These are all metaphors now. Okay, it's amazing when God reveals these things and the metaphors and the deeper hidden meaning, not so much esoteric hidden, but maybe so. Sorry. But the idea that the church go into hiding, go escape, harpazo, rapture, is exactly what is representative of a rapture. That the groom, being Jesus Christ, coming for his bride, just like in a traditional Jewish wedding, he takes her, she has to have her candles lit, she has to wait. And at any time, because Jesus said before he left, he goes, I go to prepare a place for you. That is very familiar to what happens in a Jewish engagement. When the groom, the bridegroom, leaves, he says, I go to prepare a place. That's very traditional. The groom, in a Jewish tradition, he would go to the father and he says, I'm going to prepare a place. And there's no real time limit, but the idea is that the bride would have to be ready at any moment he could come. And now a lot of people don't get the rapture. That is the rapture. That is what a wedding, that's how a wedding goes in the traditional Jewish, just traditional Jewish wedding. So this is exactly what is happening to the Christian church. Jesus said, I would go to prepare your place, meaning they were already engaged. The Christian church is already engaged to Jesus. Now, it's up to us to go through a lot of things. Now that time period, you remember, we're on God's calendar. So a week to us is maybe like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday on the calendar that we go by. What they call that, the Greco-Roman calendar or the solar calendar, whatever. Okay, I know that matters, but right now it doesn't. The point is that when we're on God's calendar, time and space God is metaphysical. He doesn't go by our calendar per se. He goes on his own calendar. So that what could look like to us a day could be seconds to the Lord. That's the difference of what happens when you go through what I believe will be a portal. See, there's a lot of things that are happening on a spiritual realm that we truly don't really understand. I mean, more I realize how less I know about a scripture. It's just, you never know where you'll end up, where the Lord takes us with this. But the bottom line is that, when we look at the relationship with Ruth and Esther, this is exactly the relationship today that you want to see, a relationship that Ruth had with Esther, Ruth being the Gentile, Esther being Jewish. And because Esther was so loyal to because Ruth was so loyal to Esther, that Boaz found that attractive. And that he ended up marrying Ruth, okay, because of the way she handled herself. Now, it's amazing that this is exactly what we're seeing today. When the church stands by Israel, God sees this. He takes notice. This puts a smile on God's face. And I really believe that we're coming into the place of the fullness of the Gentiles, meaning when Ruth was full after gleaning in the field, okay, it was time to focus on Esther. Okay, but that was, again, this is more of the grafting in, because one olive tree means we were merged together as one family tree. Okay. Now, this is very typical of the traditional Jewish relationship between Christians. Okay. There's a lot of controversies over the years. Okay. It's very much separate in its own way. But what happens is Israel in a Jewish tradition, that traditionally you're only Jewish, truly Jewish, if you have a Jewish mother. Now, that's tradition, okay? But if you take all those things away and you take situations like in my case where you were born into with a Jewish mother, but you're put into a foster care. So you're grafted. In my case, I was grafted in. I was grafted into a different family. So I grew up, I lived among mostly Catholics and Christians, but it still didn't take away from the fact that I grew up, I was born Jewish, didn't take any of those things away. But what attracted me about Christians as Jewish born, is that relationship, just like the relationship Ruth had with Esther, me more or less like Esther, how loyal Christians are. And that loyalty is what attracted me to become Christian, to become Messianic. Now, that may not make sense in a bigger scale, but that is the grafting in. Now, I would let you elaborate more. You're going to listen to more about this with Rabbi Stephen Ben Danoon. He elaborates more. I think also Perry Stone does. But it's really about this fullness of the Gentiles. When this happens, that is when that's when things change. Because that relationship, and God sees that, and I really believe that people are looking for one specific sign. Okay, there's probably a lot of signs to look for. But it's that relationship that I think that's the game changer. And when the fullness of the Gentiles, and I elaborate in this in the video that's already posted, you want to listen to that, and then I'll hopefully get a chance to pull it all together so you get it. I'm hoping I get it, but I'm going to pick this up on the next video. God bless you guys.